Thanks very much, Alistair. And thanks very much to Andrew, who threw this at me during the dinner last night. And apologies to you, because you came here because you were expecting to listen to somebody else talk about something completely different. So if you now get up and leave the room, I will not be offended. So I named this lecture Keeping Olympic and Paralympic Athletes Healthy, Preparing for the Games. So what I'm about to do is discuss how we work within the Norwegian Olympic Committee, Olympic and Paralympic Committee, I should say, to keep our athletes healthy, basically. So this is where I'm based as the CMO of the Norwegian Olympic Committee. I think also internationally known over the years as Olympiatoppen, that's what we call ourselves. A very unimpressive building in Oslo. And I'll start out by describing our values. And these are the values encompassing all of Norwegian sports, but they also apply as much to elite sports as the entire confederational sport. And the one unique thing about Norway is that all sports from grassroots through professional sports are under the same governing body. So the four values are joy of sport. And in Olympiatoppen, we see that as a driving force. We see it's important that that is the primary driving force. Honesty, we see that as a performance value, again, helping our athletes compete. And community as a competitive advantage. In other words, even the individual sports we treat very much as team sports. And I think that is also an important factor. And then the final value is health. And obviously that is a prerequisite for quality of life, but it also is a prerequisite for performance. So then, how does this apply to Norwegian elite sports? Well, if you stop for a second and you start thinking about it, I think most people see health and sport as equal, as overlapping entities, don't they? Think of your mother, or think of your aunt, or think of the general public. They have this perception of health and sport being overlapping or equal. And the question is, are they? Because if you look at some of the mottos that underpin elite sports, it started out with a healthy mind and body and so on. But I think most people will see this as the motto of the Olympics. Faster, higher, stronger. And the question is, how much do these two overlap? If you look at the values underpinning medicine, it's about health, it's about wellness, it's about function, it's about disease prevention. If you think about the values underpinning sport, elite sport, it's about winning, it's about performance, it's about elitism, it's about entertainment more and more, and competitiveness. And I would challenge you to find much overlap between those two. There is a fundamental tension between the two, and we as sports medicine practitioners, physicians, physical therapists, allied health personnel working with our elite athletes, we have in many situations a choice to make of where we put our feet in the decision-making processes around athletes. I would say that there's plenty of people in the entourage of the athlete that have both feet firmly planted in the performance side of this scale. And I think it's critically important that we as medical personnel, and this applies to our medical department, place both our feet firmly in the health side of this scale. In other words, make sure that you do not become the biggest fan of your patients. Then your feet are placed on the wrong side of the scale. So this means that there are some important principles underpinning what we do in the medical department, or the Department of Sports Medicine in Olympiatoppen. One thing is that for us, for our department, long-term health is more important and weighs more than the short-term results. And this applies, for instance, to return to play decision making. Again, there's plenty of people on the other side of the weight scale in those situations. And that means that the primary objective of our department and my doctors and my physios should be to focus on the health of the athlete, not on performance. But of course, if you're healthy, you're more likely to succeed as an athlete. The expectations to our department is that we do supply top quality medical care. It is that we are available. It is that we know people like you around the world who can also help our athletes in situations, and that we have the ability to be flexible, not being run like a normal surgery, but working in a much more flexible and sort of on-the-go fashion as a department. This as background, so the main goal for us is then to collaborate with the national federations and our regional centers to provide optimal medical care for our athletes, and also work to prevent illness and injury in our athletes. Just as a little bit of a background, so you get an idea of who we are, what we are, how big we are, who we are. So these are two bosses. So these are the nurses in the clinic. We all know that is the case, right? Then there's about 5 full-time positions of physicians, most sports physicians, general sports physicians, but also part-time physicians as orthopedic surgeons, psychologists, radiologists, pulmonary medicine specialists. In other words, a team that can cover most of the most common health problems that we see in the clinic over time. And 6 full-time physical therapists, manual therapists, sports physical therapists, very experienced, and also specialized in or sub-specialized in it could be shoulder problems or knee problems or whatever, to provide the highest level of medical care. Our scope is Olympia top athletes, so these are athletes who have won already. So to become an Olympia top athlete, you have to have won a medal in the World Championships or the Olympic Games to qualify. And we have about 300 of those athletes currently that we take care of. And then we also open for national team athletes, junior and senior, across all sports. And we have these elite high school, youth high school programs. And again, all those students from age 14 and up are welcome to come and see us in the clinic if they have a problem. On top of running this clinic, we also have a specific role in following up these scholarship athletes, the Olympia top athletes, and the Olympic and Paralympic candidates, preparing for each Olympic Games. And this is what the rest of the talk is going to be mostly about. And in addition to leading the medical team during Games time for all the major events. And this poses some challenges. And if I now think of golf, I would think these challenges are exactly the same in the world of elite golf as they are across many of the sports that we take care of at Olympiatoppen. We have lots of small teams across the sports. The athletes live and travel all over the world during their competition year. Few of the sports actually do have medical coverage, a doctor or a physio traveling with them. And because of that, athletes relate to multiple medical providers. It could be the tour doctor, it could be the local physician in the town in France where the cyclist lives, it could be the local physician in his hometown in Norway whenever he comes back there. It could be the national team physician, it could be the club physician, and it could be an Olympia top physician, plus all the other physios and allied health personnel that they might relate to during a normal competition year. And this is a big challenge because communication between these medical providers is a big challenge. And the other thing we know is that athletes can be slow in reporting a new problem, so we only see them when the problem has become a big problem and they really must come and seek help. So many of these problems go under the radar and do not have a clear management plan. Now, this here is the Pyeongchang 2018 team, so it's to scale. Each of these persons represent one athlete preparing for the Pyeongchang Olympic Games, and each of these represent an athlete preparing for the Paralympic Games in Pyeongchang 2018. And the point of showing this is that this is the normal situation. These are the teams that actually, or the sports that actually do have a team physician or do have a team physio, or both. And some sports have a lot of money, other sports do not have that much money. So one of our role in our medical center is then to fill the gaps. So assign each of, or my team, a doctor and or a physio to follow up this team, not travel with them 365 days a year prior to the games, but to follow, to be their point of contact, and I'll show you the model that we use to do this. Because the hub in the wheel of our program is a screening and monitoring program. So about 2 years prior to each game cycle, we identify who the candidates are and the Olympic top athletes are, and we invite them to the medical center to a screening, which I'll describe shortly. That screening is expected to result in targeted follow-up with clear responsibilities for the athlete, for the doctor, for whoever is involved in making or doing the follow-up. And then we have a continuous injury and illness monitoring leading up to and through the games period. This is our main tool. This is how we interact with athletes, interact with their medical personnel if there is one, and how we sort of the system built to follow them up. A little bit more detail here. So on your left, you see the periodic health evaluation, which includes a comprehensive health screening. On the right, you see the monitoring, and I will describe both, and both of them are meant then to lead to action as we go along. One side note is that this is primarily meant as a clinical program to optimize athlete health and ultimately perhaps win more medals. But under the surface, we also try to do some epidemiological research, and at the end of this talk, I'll share some of those data with you. But the important thing, the guiding principle of this is that this is meant to be a program that has direct and immediate benefits for the athletes. It is not a research program as such. So, first, the screening or the periodic health evaluation, as we coined it in a consensus meeting 14 years ago, put together, convened by the IOC, where this group of at least supposedly experts, I was there too, so I'm not sure about the expertise of everyone who was there, but anyway, we wrote this consensus statement on the periodic health evaluation of elite athletes in 2009. If you read that paper carefully, you'll see that there are some, we have listed, if not listed, at least mentioned some of the goals you might have when you do a screening exam. And how many of you do athlete screening exams here? Not that many? Okay, a few. So one could be to identify the high-risk athlete. A second could be to identify an existing problem the athlete has when you bring him in for a consultation or for the screening. A third could be to test the athlete to get baseline data. So, for example, if the athlete then later gets an ACL injury, you know what he or she was like before they got the injury, so that'll help you make in the decision-making process returning to play. It's an opportunity, very important in these days, to review medication and supplements that they're using so that there is no inadvertent doping case in your team. Establish a relationship with the athlete. Many people think that the most important thing in this setting is for you to get to know the athlete, to get his medical history or her medical history. But in fact, what we believe is that this meeting is as important for the athlete to get to know you, because that will lower the bar for telling or reaching out whenever they have a problem. And then, well, Norway is not a litigious society, such as countries that I will not mention, but there are some international federations that require a certificate of health to be able to participate. I think that is least important of the potential reasons for doing this. So let's focus just for a second, and this is a talk in itself, on identifying the high-risk athlete. That is fortune-telling in some ways. You're trying based on tests you do, examinations you do, to say that, well, this athlete is going to be injured. That's easy, because I see the crutches. But that this athlete will not, or the likelihood is so low that there's no point in any specific intervention for this athlete. And the long and the short of the other talk on whether this is possible is no. This cannot be done. You can ask me later if you want the explanations for why, but it's like a coin toss. If you do a test, you try and draw a line and say, if you're below this, you're at risk. If you're above this, you're not at risk. It doesn't work. Trust me on that. You'll have to trust me on that, because I'm going to move on. On the other hand, identifying existing medical problems is certainly possible. And this is the methodology, an extensive questionnaire that they complete online. And I'll give you access to this if you're at all interested. With additional bits for our para-athletes, and they're related to urinary function, gastrointestinal and bowel problems, and activities of daily living, and special considerations for travel. So we have all that information for that group. And these are some preliminary results of outcomes of the screening. This is from 3 Olympic and Paralympic cycles. I don't quite remember the number of examinations in here, but it's in the many hundreds. And you will see that in a situation, and these are typically done off seasons, or after the end of the season, or when they come back to start training for the next season. Half of them are injured. Half of them have been injured in the last 6 months. A much higher proportion of illness or chronic disease in the Paralympic group, as you would expect. So that's a very important consideration to optimize treatment for those chronic health problems that they might have. No difference really in the proportion with asthma or allergy between the Paralympians and the Olympians. In other words, when we do these examinations, we find, sorry about my English, all kinds of shit that we do need to do something about, and this is where the action plans come in. That's the end of this, where we sit down with the athlete, with the medical team, and make a plan, a commitment, and try to get a commitment to that plan from everyone involved. Katrin Steffen, one of our researchers in the Oslo Sports Trauma Research Center, is now working on this data set, and I'm expecting that we will have papers coming out over the next months, because it's a huge database that will be of interest to many. For example, what is the value of blood tests that we do during screening? The other side of this is then the screening and monitoring program. This program is meant to serve 2 objectives, and they're complementary. One on the individual level for the athlete, and the other for us as an organization. So on the individual level, the primary purpose is to facilitate communication between the athlete and medical staff. And that's not just our medical staff, but also team medical staff, the people they relate to, will have access to the information if the athlete wants to provide that to everyone. Also, to pick up problems early. Early identification of small problems before they become big problems is really the key here. And then we can monitor continuously known problems. So when you get a phone call from an athlete, what do I do now with my patellar tendinopathy? We can have that conversation based on how his patellar tendinopathy has developed over the last few months, and looking at the load, the competitions, and then plan for the future. So those data are really important to us. Then, as an organization, we can identify injury and illness patterns. We heard about the epidemiology of golf injuries this morning. What types of injuries, which athletes are affected, what times of the year do these problems occur, and that will help us as an organization to identify prevention priorities for each sport, for each team, for us as an organization as a whole. And we have numerous examples, at least several examples, of very effective interventions introduced on a team level because of patterns that we've seen in the past, where we have amazing results and bringing down overuse injuries in specific athlete populations, for example, which directly is data-driven from this surveillance program. So this is our Tokyo team. And again, you'll see the sports that Norway participated in Tokyo, and you'll see which medical providers follow these athletes from the national federation. In other words, which sports do have a team doctor and team physio traveling with the team, or at least affiliated with the team. What we do then is we organize this into groups where we fill the gaps, essentially. So the green here are my staff, who are then given a responsibility for that sport, ideally 2 years before the Olympic Games. And they will then be the ones to do the screening exams, and they will be the ones who follow up the monitoring results as they come in and interact with the athletes and those teams. In the middle here is the program coordinator, Lars Haugwad, and with him, he has the CMO for the Olympic team and the CMO for the Paralympic team. Their pictures are there, Thomas and Hilde. And this team of 3 are the managers of the program, and then everyone working with each of the teams are responsible for follow-up of their athletes. How does it work? Well, the athlete every week on their cell phone gets an alert, and that alert is a link to a questionnaire. The questionnaire result goes into the database, and if there's a new injury or a new health problem reported, there is an alert to the health team, so I get that on my phone on a Sunday evening, and we'll then have the opportunity to reach out to the athlete and ask, well, is this a big problem? Should we do something about it, or what should we do something about it? I'll do the individual follow-up, and I'll also put the diagnosis of this problem into the system. If you're interested in the questionnaire, it's the Oslo Sports Trauma Research Center questionnaire, which is now being used maybe in your study as well, is it? Yes? To collect data on injury and illness in athletes in a systematic way. I guess the father of this is Ben Clarkson, who you see a picture of down here, who's also involved in the golf surveillance projects that are ongoing that we heard about earlier this morning. It works like this. It's very simple. The athletes get 4 questions once a week, usually Sunday evening. One question is about performance. One is about whether they have had to modify their training in any way. One is about whether the health problem affects their performance. And the 4th is about the level of symptoms. And usually with an injury, that is pain, but with other health problems could be coughing or fever or whatever. And they score, they click this, and that way they score from no problem, and then a 4-graded questionnaire. And based on that, we can sum up a score to indicate the case severity. So how severe is this problem? If they do report a problem, we give them some follow-up questions related to which, is it an injury or an illness, which body region, what symptoms, did you miss any training completely? How many days of training or competition did you miss last week? And I don't even, and who knows about it? And add comments so that we can get a better picture of what the situation is. The manager of the program has then access to all the teams in this dashboard that you see here. And I, as the physician of one of these teams, I actually am the doctor of the team of the beach volleyball team. I can then see in this easy graph here, if you're green, you're healthy. And then the coloring indicates the severity of the health problem that was reported. And this just shows the last 5 weeks. And if I go to the next slide here, you will see the data for one athlete where each of these peaks here indicate the severity of each of these injuries that have occurred over the last year in this athlete, and you see the diagnosis down here. So we do collect then a very helpful historical database for each athlete, which we use, obviously, when we have this annual health examination in our clinic. And it's remarkable. Athletes do not even remember being hospitalized 6 months ago. So if you sit down with them and you ask them, did you have, so how was your health last year? And say, oh, it's fine, no problems. Okay, you sure? Yeah. And then I bring up this, and they go, oh. Yeah. And it's a real eye-opener, and also in the way that they realize then that I might be losing a lot of training and even competition because of injuries or illness problems during the past year, and there may be something that we can do about it. You can read more about this program. We published some of the results, and there will be more coming out over the next year on the development of the method, and also on results from our surveillance in the Olympic and Paralympic setting. So I'm going to finish this off by sharing some, not quite yet, but I'm going to share some data to give you an idea of what type of questions we can answer on a group level based on the data we collect here. Such as how often do they get sick, how many are sick or injured, and what are the biggest problems within our team. So these data are 10 Olympic and Paralympic cycles, winter and summer. So 5 cycles, but Paralympic and Olympic. So in other words, 10 years of prospective data collected on all our athletes. 558 Olympic athletes. Some of them compete in many Olympic and Paralympic games. So that's the reason for the discrepancy in the numbers. So over this period, this database includes 35,000 weeks of athlete participation and 4,000 health problems. So it's becoming a solid database that we can make some decisions based on. So here are the data. On average, each of our athletes report 5 health problems per year. 3 injuries and 2 illnesses. 5 health problems per year. At any given time, 37% of our para-athletes report some health problem. 20% have an injury, acute or overuse, and 20% an illness. So you can see that the illness proportion in this group is higher than in the Olympic athletes. Here are the Olympic athletes data, 32%. Let me go back so you can remember, 37. Here the Olympic athletes, 32%. 24%, 9%. So you see there's a difference between these populations here. Based on the data, we can also produce what we call risk matrices. Let me take a moment to explain what they are. So if you focus on this on the left here, this is for acute injuries. The horizontal axis is the incidence, so the number of health problems per athlete per year on this axis. On this axis is the average severity. So here as days of time loss per health problem. Acute injuries here, overuse injuries here, and illnesses here. And now you're wondering what these dots mean. So we split our total population into 4. This is the endurance athletes. This is the technical, tactical sports. This is where golf would find itself. And this is the team sports. And these are the Paralympians. I'm sure you're not surprised to see that endurance athletes have few acute injuries. The team sport athletes are up here with a much higher rate. And what I should say is that the darker the color, obviously the bigger the problem is. So. And you've already had a look at the overuse injuries, where you see that there's remarkably little difference between them, except that, surprisingly, endurance athletes have a lower have a lower risk of overuse injuries than the other sports. Oops, sorry. And then on the right hand here, same point as I made before, illnesses is primarily a problem with Paralympians and endurance athletes. We can play with these data in many different ways. So we can then, when you dive in, create these diagrams to show what type of injury locations dominate. And the open circles here are overuse problems or gradual onset problems. The solid circles are acute, sudden onset injuries. And you see in the endurance sports, it's the open circles dominating. And you see in the team sports, we talked about it earlier, going back to your data, Debbie, wherever you are there. Knee problems being the clearly number one problem in the team sports group here. So I'm not going to bore you or kill you with data here, but I think there are some key messages coming out of these slides now. What do these data mean for athletes and coaches? 26 days lost from training on average per year. That's almost a whole month gone. 29 days in Paralympians, 24 days in Olympians. This is our selling argument number one, speaking with the coaches, speaking with the managers, speaking with the senior management in Olympiatoppen, and the reason why they give us the resources to run this program and try and run the program even better going forward. It is important that the stick approach doesn't really work if you want athletes and coaches to be involved in the program. It is the carrot approach that works. There has to be an immediate and direct benefit. They have to sense, athletes and coaches have to sense that there is an immediate direct benefit for them to be part of the screening and monitoring program, to support it fully and wholeheartedly. So when the athletes ask, what's in it for me? When the physio asks, what's in it for me? And when the coach asks, what's in it for me? We think that all those three groups have something in it for them. For the athlete, it's better, more immediate medical care. For the medical team, makes it easier to do a good job. Or for the coach, more training days, more availability of players on the team so they can do a better job preparing for the games and actually be there when the games start. I've had some conversations with people over the last few days. They hear I'm from Norway. Oh, Norway winning all these gold medals in the Winter Games. And people seem to think that it's a God-given fact that gold medals fall down from heaven in Norway and not in Sweden, just across the border. Are no Swedes here? No Swedes here, good. Yeah. So I'll share these statistics with you. This is Torino, so we're only back to 2006. Can you see where Norway is on the medals table here? Number 13, 2 gold medals Norway won in Torino in 2006. We did better in Vancouver, moved up to 4th place with 9 medals. And one big difference between the two is that in Torino, 17% of our athletes were ill during games time. And through all those measures that everyone had learned about now during the COVID pandemic, because we've been doing this since Vancouver, there's really no difference in how our team behaved now as opposed to before COVID. 5% of athletes ill. This experience has been published in this paper here, if you're interested in reading about it, but now the whole world knows what to do, so there's nothing new in that for you. Unfortunately, the Swedes are also learning. This is Russia. We're actually number 1 now because they took some medals away from the Russians, I think. And this is Pyeongchang 2018, Norway at top there with 14 medals. I didn't include Beijing because I'm modest, so I left that out. But the key figures here, 7%, 6%, Beijing was 5%. So we think, of course, that the real reason for the success of the Norwegian Olympic team is the screening and monitoring program and the medical department at Olympiatoppen. That's really the only reason why we're doing so well. And you might now think that, well, we have everything thought out and we're really, really well prepared for games time. I'm now going to share a video with you that I captured halfway through the Pyeongchang Olympic Games. And it's from the wall in our cafeteria in Oslo, in Olympiatoppen, in the training center in Oslo. And it'll show you how ill prepared we were for Pyeongchang, just to sort of bring this down to reality.
Thaiboks det beste vi møter med rollene der.
Ja.
Så det veldig bredt, så det litt verre.
Thank you very much for your attention.
What an interesting and God, it always made me feel tired, all that evaluation and monitoring of health outcomes, etc. I was kind of interested, actually, that you have a musculoskeletal injury, but the effect on your mental health of the athlete is enormous. Are you collecting any data at all as to depression statistics or, feeling of well-being? And is that why the endurance athletes, who tend to be individuals, actually suffer less than those who have practiced in team sports, where actually the desire to win and not let your teammates down is much greater?
Well, to answer the first question first, the way the question in the app is framed, it is meant to be able to capture not just physical problems, but also mental issues. It's been carefully framed to encompass all the domains of health, if you like. But what we do know is that athletes underreport mental issues. So I do not think that this tool is a good tool to capture that side of the coin. One of our psychologists is currently doing his PhD on mental health of our Olympiatoppen athletes or elite athletes in bigger populations as well. Some of his work has come out, but more will be coming out over the next year or so. And he has collected data over the last 3-year period and done clinical interviews and so on. And it's clear it's a major issue. It has been an Achilles heel. It's been something that we haven't really put as much resources into in the past, and we'll hear more from Margot this afternoon on mental health in athletes. But I think it's going to be extremely difficult to build a tool where we can monitor this on a continuous basis in the same way as we do with the simple 4 questions, because that's the maximum of what athletes will tolerate on a week-to-week basis.
We're, of course, talking about very young people. I was astonished to hear that at the Beijing Olympics they ordered 10,000 condoms for the Olympic Village. I don't know if you know that statistic or not. Can we open it out to the audience?
Maybe I can add to that. And I see Patrick here also
very
adding.
liberal in Norway and Sweden.
Well, yeah, I'm also the chair of the IOC Medical Commission Games Group for Tokyo and for Paris to come up, and the condom issue is always creates a lot of problems and issues. But I think it's the most coveted souvenir from the Olympic Games, and that's why the 10,000 go.
Excellent. Yes, sir.
Just hold on 2 seconds. The pre-record.
Well, Roald, thank you for your presentation. I would say that you live in an ideal world because the athlete you describe fall under your control for a short time because they're preparing the Olympic and the Para. The problem is a bit different when you're a club physician or a professional club physician, because we're always sitting between 2 chairs. On one hand, our duty as physician, and on the other hand, the huge pressure of the management of the club, especially when you have very well-known professional players, you know. So we are always to deal with our duty once more as doctor, but also we have to explain. When I saw your last slide with 24 days loss, you imagine what will represent for a professional club, a player that pay a huge amount of money, they can play for 24 days. So we have to cope with it, but it's always a complication. The problem you describe, and thanks to you, is great because we have experienced that within the preparation of the Olympic Games. At the time of the Olympics, all the athletes fall under the control of our National Olympic Committee. But after that, they come back to their own clubs or individual, and the problem is a bit different.
No, that's an important point, and it allows me to make an additional point. Thank you. I think it's important to keep in mind that the people that these data are from, the Olympic athletes, are all of them people who have won a gold medal or a medal in a world championship or an Olympic Games. So they are superstars, depending on the prestige of the sport. Obviously, some are more superstars than others. And these are data captured throughout the entire year. So in there you have the world's best, or at least he was the world's best male handball player in the world, making millions. Again, the same kind of athlete you're talking about. Unfortunately, we only have one football player from Norway, but he's not in this program yet. The point being that they are under the same pressures. And most of the year, they're in their clubs, with their clubs. So these 24 days are the result of what is happening out in the club system, plus those training camps and events where they play for the national team as well. So the 24 days is not going to be any different if you capture data from a Premier League club like United or Liverpool. I don't remember the exact similar data for footballers, but it's going to be very close to this. The important point, though, is that unless you, as a medical professional, in that discussion with club management, with the coach, with the player, with the agent, with the family, with all the other important hang-arounds like an athlete, unless you represent the health side of the scale, there's nobody there who is representing the health scale. And it isn't up to me to say, you cannot play. Our system isn't like that. We give advice, and I think that's what everyone does, also here in Scotland. You give advice and you say, well, I don't think you should be playing. Or if you play, the risk is this and this for that and that. And then it's a group discussion to decide whether the risk is acceptable or if the risk is unacceptable. And that's another whole talk, I'm afraid.
Yeah, probably going back to golf, if your performance is not up to scratch, you don't really want to play, which is perhaps slightly different to when you've set yourself up for a single event. Yes, sir.
2 seconds.
And that's an important point you make there. In the individual sports, athletes know if I can't do my best, there's no point in running, basically. So that's a very easy conversation to have, in fact.
So even though these are Olympic athletes, how do you encourage and ensure compliance in the data collection and as well as accurate data collection? And how could that then be transferred to more amateur athletes and the recreational athletes? We're developing a web-based injury surveillance program for Irish amateur golfers. So that's one of the challenges that we're really looking at, is accurate data collection and compliance.
In our system, the key issue with compliance is that when they complete that app on the Sunday afternoon, they have to feel that the person I'm speaking to now is Roald, so the beach volleyball team. This goes directly to Roald. It doesn't go to anybody else. He gets this information. And I know if I put in a new problem that started this morning, I know he's going to call me tonight. So that there's a direct and immediate benefit to them from reporting honestly into this. We suspect that there's under-reporting, especially within the teams. So let's say the handball team, because they do want to be selected for the games. So I'm sure there are some of them who are hiding overuse problems as long as they can perform. If they are in the category where their spot on the team isn't guaranteed, they might hold information back. So these are minimum estimates. They're not maximum estimates. That's also important too. So I think the advice in doing a study with amateur and recreational golfers is that, well, if you put something in, you're going to get a free consult with me, and I'm going to fix your problem. Maybe, I don't know. But it is difficult. Yes.
Anyone else? I was interested in the question of competitiveness and stress. Most people who play golf, actually, you go to the first tee and you're pretty stressed out, and you have a heart attack when you start throwing your clubs around on the golf course. Do you think it's a medical person's job to reduce that stress, or is that the coach's job?
Well, I think that's primarily the coaching team's job, but you know, the first thing I learned as a doctor traveling with a team or being with, I'm a former athlete, so I know the locker room banter and I can fit in a way. And essentially, if you've done your job prior to the Olympic Games, you have nothing to do during games time, right? And then you have to find other things to do, whether it's carrying bags, whether it's helping out, you know, fixing a quick lunch or running an errand, or just being there for athletes. Just be there, be ears and eyes for the coaching team. So much of the time, it will go through the coach, but you know, when it's non-medical information, I will just let him know that, you know, I now sense that this player isn't where he should be. So maybe, yeah.
Maybe a bit harder for the amateur golfer, because having teed off on the first in the old course once and actually hit the ball backwards, I felt that it was not a good start to the round. I did still manage to pile the hole. Right, we're just about on time, so I think we should go for lunch. Would that sound good? Thank you very much to Roland for keeping us entertained this morning, and we look forward to seeing you all this afternoon.